Teachers, what's the weirdest thing you've had to take away from a student? I was covering another student's class one day and caught a kid watching adult content. I sent him to the office and the first thing they asked me was if it was adults or kids. That's how I found out that student was a registered sex offender. It was adults, for the record. It then came out that he had been watching adult content in that class for weeks and the regular teacher was so bad at his job / oblivious that he didn't notice. Edits. Because people keep asking, it was a high school class with mixed grades in it, so he wasn't someone I had in my normal classes, so I don't know what grade he was in. Yes, teenagers can be registered offenders. It's not a permanent list like it is for adults, but if you attack someone or self-pleasure on the school bus, you will get a parole officer and be put on a list. I don't know what his story was, but I knew other students who did those things. They were also placed in foster homes with other offenders. Depending on what they did, their age, and how long ago it was, they were eventually all sent back to public school. The school was supposed to have an adult content blocker, but someone at the third-party company they used messed up and let it slip for about 3 months. You can bet someone got in a lot of trouble for that. My coworker who didn't notice adult content in his room got a talking to, but no actual repercussions. Yikes. I wonder how common that is. I mean, the worst thing I ever did in class was play Pokemon under my desk. Story 2. Not a teacher, but if you were to ask her, this would probably be it. Various vegetables. She was super strict about no phones and would check at the slightest sign you might have your phone. As a half protest, half prank, we began our shenanigans. A girl's family member passed away and was texting on her phone about it to other family members. The teacher took her phone. So we began bringing in potatoes, celery, carrots, tomatoes, and other vegetables. We'd smuggle them into class and then hold them under our desks and look at them as though we were texting. She kept trying to catch us, but then just thought we were weird. This goes on for at least a week. Finally, she instituted a zero-tolerance policy against vegetables. So we switched to fruit. So for a few weeks, she was constantly confiscating various fruits and vegetables. We finally stopped when it wasn't as fun anymore, and she wasn't ever quite as strict about phones after that. That's kind of awesome. There's an Apple joke to be made here somewhere. Story 3. I did a similar thing in high school, but it was a one-time deal and not an ongoing joke. A group of us picked a day to be Fake Electronics Day, where we would bring in spoofs of banned items, giant cell phones from the early 90s that hadn't actually worked in a decade, iPods, and digital cameras. This was before smartphones. Made out of cardboard, stuff like that. The idea was basically the same as yours. We would pretend to use it in class, look like we were trying to keep it hidden, but intentionally got caught. And to see if we could get a reaction from the teachers when they realized what we actually had. I got a pretty good laugh from my math teacher that day. I had plugged a pair of earphones into a side of an apple, as in the fruit, and then stuck the earbuds in my ears when I knew he was looking. He shook his head at me and held out his hand for me to turn in my device, so I walked up and handed him the apple with the headphones still stuck in it. There was a moment of silence while he processed what had happened, and then he started roaring with laughter. I was pretty proud of that one. Story 4. An entire menagerie of live insects. One afternoon, my class decided that they should see how many bugs they could capture and keep alive in my classroom. The next day, I returned from covering lunch duty in another part of the school and noticed that one of the cubbies had paper towels taped over the front like a curtain. Before I could investigate, I noticed several Tupperware containers hiding in desks. Dozens of worms, that was the cubby, many assorted beetles, uncounted ants, 4 bees, a wasp, and, most upsetting, several flies which were crazy glued to index cards and had their wings removed. That was a long day and a long year. Oh, how old was this class? Like, if you're gonna kill a fly, but don't rip the wings off. Story 5. Former teacher here wasn't part of the initial apprehension, but was part of the follow-up investigation. Weirdest thing was a bag of turtles. Yep, kid caught a bunch of little salmonella-filled red-eared sliders at a local pond on his way to school one day. We had a turtle black market at school by noon, and by the end of the day, the principal had a dozen in a bowl in his office. Kid got caught because a terrible smell was reported from his locker. Janitor opened it up and there was a bag of turtles. The rest of the day was spent tracking down the ones that had already been sold. Edit. I've owned a few reptiles as pets. To my knowledge, small, under 4 inches, red-eared sliders have been illegal in the pet trade for quite some time due to the risk of salmonella in their skin. All turtles that were brought to school were under 4 inches. Principal released the turtles to the pond that evening. Middle school, kid was 7th grader. The best business venture we had at the school was when a different kid, who walked to school would stop and buy 10 to 15 Monster energy drinks from a convenience store in the morning and sell them at school. Kid banked. The operation was eventually shut down. Wish I knew what that kid was doing now. Story 6. Obligatory, not a teacher. I'm an EA, educational assistant in a school. Plastic spoons. Hundreds of them. I still don't know why, but one grade 5 kid came to school with his backpack stuffed full. Nothing else was in his backpack, not even his lunch. He hung it on the back of the chair and pulled out a spoon and was fiddling around with it instead of doing work. So I took the spoon away. 10 minutes later, he has another one. I took that. 10 minutes more, a third. The teacher took it away. 10 minutes later, another. You can see the pattern here. I finally opened his backpack when I saw him grab the 6th or 7th spoon and the bag was full. Obviously, the teacher had to call home since he had no lunch. Mom comes, looks at him with just resignation and goes, "Why?" As she hands him his lunch, he shrugged, grinned, and walked back to class. Mom is clearly used to it and has learned to go with the flow. Obviously, we just don't see the vision, okay? There's something bigger at play. Story 7. A flavored condom from a kindergartner. This little boy comes into music class at 1 p.m. or so, and he's been at school since 9 o'clock, and says to me, "Look, I have candy!" and holds up a wrapped strawberry-flavored condom. Trying not to cause a scene, I tell him, "Remember, we're not going to eat in music class because it's hard to sing with candy in our mouths." I pointed out the pocket on his jean jacket with a snap button closure and tell him to put it in there, making a mental note to tell the teacher later. I always try to avoid losing control of a room of 25-year-olds. Kid puts condom in his pocket, and I start music class. I see him putting something in his mouth. "Put that back in your pocket for after school," or something to that effect. Pretty sure food is scarce at home, and taking it away would have been a huge scene. Teacher comes at the end of the half-hour lesson, and I discreetly tell her what's going on, and she says she'll handle it. Great. After school, the middle-aged male school counselor comes up to me and says, "Thanks to you, I've been walking around an elementary school all afternoon with a flavored condom in my pocket." Sorry, not sorry. Edit. The wrapper had pictures of strawberries on it. Also, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to take candy from a 5-year-old, but it doesn't go well. Especially if you take candy from a kid who doesn't have a lot of food at home and then put it in the garbage in front of him. It would have been a massive scene, and the other 20 kids would have gone wild. I chose to keep the problem as controlled as possible. Honestly, a heads-up play by the teacher. I would not have thought that far ahead. Story 8. I was a student, but had a bunch of expended munitions, including an expended CS grenade. Think tear gas? Taken from me by my 7th grade vice principal. I used to scour the NATO training grounds when my dad was stationed in Germany in the 70s. I found an expended CS grenade and brought it, and other finds, to school to show off to my friends. Not knowing there had been a terror bomb earlier that day at another NATO facility, I brought a bunch of my stuff to school. They brought a bomb dog onto our school bus at the Ramstein AFB gate, and the dog ignored me. I was showing off the grenade to my friends when the teacher walked in. The grenade had been expended, but CS is really a fine dust, and the active material was gently dusting the room. She could easily smell the tear gas and sent me to the office. They took my stuff, chided me for bringing it, and returned it 2 weeks later. A few weeks after that, the vice principal asked if I had everything returned. I said I had. He said someone turned in a 105mm shell casing into Lost and Found and offered it to me. I gladly took it. Being the 70s, everyone was chill. The teacher was right to get that nasty stuff out of her class, and I scored another cool thing. Today, that would have had the SWAT team there, and I might well have had to go to court. Story 9. Not a teacher, but was part of an almost eliminating the prize box in my kid's class. Kid is in kindergarten. I'm friends with a few of the other fathers in her class. One of the things her class has is a prize box. If the kids are all on their game for the week or a kid does something especially good, they get to choose something from the box. It's filled with the kind of stuff you would find in a blister pack in the dollar store. Stuff like a little plastic car or a bouncy ball or whatever. Anyways, the kids love it. The parents supply stuff for it. So one day, my kid comes home with an effing kazoo from the thing. Nothing like a 6-year-old who just figured out how a kazoo works while you were trying to work from home. So immediately I fire off an email to the list of my fellow dads asking what wise butt put kazoos in the prize box, and then see the 2 other people had beat me to the question. One of the guys finally replies back, and it was on. I countered with whistles. Someone else had this annoying popping thing. Someone else got the world's worst balls of planes, so like the second time it flew, it was destined to snap in half and upset your kid. This went on for like a good 2 weeks before someone crossed the line and sent in glitter. By this point, the teacher was on to us and told our wives on us. Dude, that's kind of awesome. All the dads secretly trying to inconvenience the others. Story 10. Wally the Whale was a drawing I made in 8th grade of a very basic chicken. 2 circles at the back with a straight shaft. Well, I added some details to make it look like a whale. For the tip, I drew a simple smiling mouth with a dot for an eye. I then drew one single gill just behind the face. I put a pectoral fin on it and drew 3 lines on both balls to make it look like tail fins. Once my creation was complete, I titled it Wally the Whale and was showing my friends my creation before having it snatched out of my hand by the teacher. Stay with me, it gets better. When I get sent to the office, all 3 principals were in there trying to hold in their laughter while they were filling out the write-up. She stopped, looked at me, and said, "What kind of whale is this? A sperm whale?" They all laughed their butts off. I still got a week of ISS for it, and for the cherry on top, I saw the teacher who snatched my creation at the gas station a while back. He told me that it's still the funniest thing he's seen as a teacher. I still get a kick out of that when I think about it. Story 11. Student teaching, tarantula and a newborn rat. Separate times but both from the same student. First full year. Jar of his boogers he had been saving from a bet with his friend that he wouldn't fill the jar. 6th graders are really something, man. Second year. First day of school for a new student. Seemed shifty in our 0 period, but thought it was nervousness. Well, during lunch, someone set off a homemade bomb in a lunch trash can. 5th period comes, and though kids saw who did it, they did not want to be a snitch. So opened backpack search and found the 2 others he was hiding. Third year, jar of mayo that the kid kept eating with his hands in class. Currently in my 4th year, but distance learning. Before I was student teaching or a teacher, I worked as an instructional aide for a non-public school that was part of a residential group home. My students I worked with were basically at last chance before being sent out of state or wards of state due to failure of the foster system, legally separated from family or juvenile hall residence. I have many stories of weird, gross, and disturbing items I have had to confiscate. Story 12. Okay, this is from my perspective as the student who got something taken away. In about grade 7, I slammed my finger in the garage door and it completely killed my fingernail. 1 week later, I was sitting in class during a movie when my friend dared me to rip the nail right off. It was about halfway on only, so of course I did. It was a slow process and caught a few other classmates' attention. So from the teacher's perspective, all she saw was some degenerates huddled in the back corner watching me play with something. So she gets up and walks over to my desk with her hand sticking out demanding whatever we were playing with. So of course I took that as the opportunity to yank my nail off and place it in her hand quickly before she saw what it was. She was not as impressed as my other classmates. Story 13. I've told this story before on Reddit, but it really fits here. One of our 3rd grade teachers had a little boy come to her desk first thing in the morning with an object in his mouth that he was blowing on to make noise. He said something like, "Look, Mrs. Smith, I found this nice whistle in the wastebasket at home." Mrs. Smith recognized the object as an applicator for a product used for vaginal yeast infections. The children went to gym class soon after morning announcements, and Mrs. Smith noted that the object was left on his desk. She threw it away in the teacher's workroom and called his mother to let her know for the future so that she could take more care with her trash. Story 14. In middle school, we had a special currency that they'd hand out to students for helping out or being kind that would then be able to be used to buy books or other small trinkets. Somehow, during the year, I obtained a bunch of dental plaque pills. They turn the plaque on your teeth a certain color to help you brush your teeth, I guess. In this case, it was dark purple. And I didn't brush my teeth very well at the time, so taking one would make my entire mouth a deep purple color. I thought I'd freak out my school friends with one, and they all thought it was really cool and wanted to know how I did it. So I bring some more the next day and give a couple out to friends who then show other kids and tell them that I can make their mouths purple too. So next day, I brought all my plaque pills to school and start charging $1 in school currency for one pill. Sometimes if a kid didn't have money, I'd make them give me whatever cool stuff they had that I needed. Keychains, pencil sharpeners, whatever they were willing to trade. And of course, all these other middle schoolers didn't do a good job of brushing their teeth either, so every kid I sold a pill to ended up with a dark purple color coating their entire mouth. Well, a bunch of kids' mouths turning purple was quickly noticed by multiple staff members. Who would have guessed? And apparently I went to school with a bunch of little narcs because very quickly I found myself in the principal's office. They took all my pills, my school money, and most of the other items that we're able to prove didn't belong to me, even though I traded it fair and square. Principal was livid. All I remember of the end result was waiting in the office, getting yelled at by the principal, zoning off as I imagined all the ways I was going to get my butt beat when my dad eventually came to pick me up, and this angry principal told him all about my little operation. But miraculously, some lady came out of a room saying, "Hey, principal, your meeting is starting right now, so we can't wait any longer." And the principal, looking frustrated but telling me that they would be right back and that I was still in a lot of trouble. And as soon as they walked into another room, my dad walked in and asked if I was ready to go, which was answered with a very hasty, "Yep." The rest of the year felt like some weird Twilight Zone. None of the other kids mentioned it again. Dad never mentioned it. Staff never mentioned it. Never talked to the principal again and made sure to avoid them like the plague. I never got in trouble, and I will never understand how. Now I just sell some drugs like a responsible adult. Well, took a bit of a sad turn there in the end, but hey, that's a quality middle school operation. If it was me, I would have gladly traded like 7 silly bands for a plaque pill. That sounds awesome. Story 15. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in 7th or 8th grade, me and my friend group would look for the biggest vegetables or chicken-shaped things and put them in our pants. Then, when we went into class, the teacher would be like, "Take that out of your pants," and we would just act like we had no clue what they were talking about. They would be like, "Take that thing out of your pants," and we would be like, "Excuse me, I don't feel comfortable exposing myself to you," and try to make it go on for as long as possible. But to answer the question, one of my friends had a garden, and I crap you not, there was the world's largest eggplant, and we took it to school. Then we got 2 mangoes, and one of my friends put it in their pants, walked into class, and the second he got in, he got taken outside and had to take it out. So long story short, this 4-foot teacher made him take it out and walk back into class with an eggplant, like 2/3 of her body weight for like the whole day, and it was so big there was no other place for her to put it because her desk couldn't fit an eggplant that big. Story 16. I thought of another one. A kid brought a corkscrew to school. He was in the 2nd grade. I was just ancillary staff for him, for vision, hearing issues, consulting, etc. I happened to be there one day, and he whipped it out, held it to another kid's neck. Before the classroom teacher and I could even react, he sort of threw the kid down and put the corkscrew back into his bag. Then he looked at me and said, "Hey, Miss Teacher Patty's here. Let's go read." As if he hadn't just been holding a corkscrew to the neck of another 7-year-old. We didn't do any reading that day. Oh, another one? My babies, and I mean these kids were my babies, loved me and always brought me flowers from the garden. So sweet. I loved these 2 so much. Then one day, kid goes, "I bought you jewelry." But he had an Arctic impairment and it sounded like Julie. So cute. "You did," I exclaimed. "You get a job, David?" He then produces a bullet. "No, I found this gold in my mom's room and thought you might want it." Story 17. I made the mistake of allowing my students to create their own word search in my first year as a teacher, meaning they'd fill a grid with letters and hide vocabulary words in them, then exchange them with the partner and have their partners solve them. Oh boy, was that a mistake. While looking over their work after school, my eyes immediately caught the word F. I looked closely and saw the kid had hidden sentences that spelled out like this without spaces. "I want to F Miss my name in the butt and do some very graphic things along those lines." It just went on and on. I turned in the worksheet to the office. He was sent to the counselor's office, and after some counseling, he had to apologize to me in a letter. The creepiest thing was, he was this short, innocent-looking, exceptionally bright kid with glasses. Even won the science fair competition, never gave me grief in class. I had to awkwardly give him his trophy and congratulate him on the science fair after the incident, to which he looked me in the eye and thanked me. Story 18. Not teacher, but my dumb self. My cousin found a fired .50 cal bullet in the ground, and I traded something for it. Me being dumb, at the age of 10, thought it would be a cool thing to bring into school. It fell out of my pocket when I was running around and some kid snitched on me. The teacher who confronted me about it was genuinely interested to see it, and he looked at it for a while and asked me where I got it from. After that, he handed it back to me and said not to bring it in again. I think back and wonder if this happened nowadays, it would have come out quite differently for me. I'm from the UK, so not as easily to come across such a thing. Just throwing a little shade from across the pond, I see you. Story 19. Little 1st grade girl walking down the hallway, pulling on a deflated balloon. Due to allergies, we can only have Mylar balloons in school. Finally get close enough, not a latex balloon, but a latex condom. She is playing with a condom. She tells me she found it on her dad's pillows this morning. So I reroute her to the nurse's office so she can show Mrs. Sue what a neat thing she found. No way I was going to touch it. Nurse tells me at the end of the day, Mom adamant denied she got it off Dad's pillow as we don't use those. Maybe you don't. Story 20. I had a female high school student whose backpack was smelling really bad for a couple of days. When I questioned her about it, she was nervous and evasive. The following day, the smell from her backpack was unbearable, and accompanied by the school counselor, I confronted her after class. She surrendered her backpack, and when the school counselor searched it, she found 2 pairs of underwear soaked in blood, her first period. In tears, she admitted that she hid them in her backpack because her mother, who was an extreme fundamental Christian, thought a woman's period was a sign of evil, much like the movie Carrie. She was terrified that her mother would find out and whip her for having her period, the poor little thing. I felt so bad for her. The school counselor ended up dealing with it, and I know Children's Protective Services got involved. People that mistreat children in the name of religion have a special place in hell reserved for them. Oh, that sucks. You know, I've admittedly never had a period. I assume it's not that fun, and I can only imagine it's even worse if somebody tried to shame you for it. That's ridiculous. Story 21. Wow, I can finally share this story. I'm not a teacher, but I had to witness a teacher take away a vibrator from a student who said it was a drink mixer. So we are about to watch Shawshank Redemption during social studies, and the teacher said we can bring drinks this time if we are going to watch a movie. Anyways, fast forward. This dude in class sees another kid stirring his drink, gets annoyed and asks him to stop. Kid stirring the drink claims he's just mixing them together. Other kid mentions that he has the best drink mixer and proceeds to pull out one of those bullet vibrators out of his backpack. Teacher immediately goes, "What are you doing with that?" The kid explains that it's a drink mixer. When our teacher asks him what makes him think it's a drink mixer, he explains that his sister told him she keeps it in her drawers in case she needs to mix her drinks. He proceeds to show everyone how you insert the bullet into your drinks, turn it on, and the vibration mixes the drink for you. Oh, to quote Bob Belcher, "Oh dear God, that sounds awful." Story 22. $500. I didn't confiscate it, but found it inside the desk of a teacher I was LTSing for. There was a sticky attached to it with the student's name. I let the school secretary know what I'd found, and she called the student's parents to let them know we had the money. It turns out their rent money had gone missing a few months prior. Apparently, my grade 3 student had taken it and somehow had it confiscated by his teacher. She went on leave and neglected to tell anyone about the cash in her desk. I remember the look of relief on the parents' face when they came to pick up that money. The school is a Title I, 100% free lunch school, so I imagine this missing money may have placed them in a jam. Story 23. Not exactly confiscated, but in high school, we often made up games within our friend group, often with someone unaware that they were contributing to one of the games, and then they'd perpetuate it when bored by making another friend an unknowing participant. In the lunchroom, we had these lunch tables that had these round plastic seats attached to them. One day we sat down to lunch and we hear a crack, and my friend stands up and holds up a seat that broke off. So naturally, when another one of our friends was in the bathroom, the seat went into his backpack. We thought he'd find it quickly because he had one of those little string backpacks he used to carry a couple of items but nothing more. He didn't find it until next period. The teacher started writing on the board and everyone got out notebooks and pens. I hear a, "What the F?" And instead of a notebook, my friend holds up the plastic seat and we crack up laughing. He didn't put it down quick enough and the teacher saw, so he was told to go bring it to the office. Another time, we tried to get someone else with a much larger bag to unknowingly walk out with a paint can. A really odd teacher we had decided to paint each wall of her room a different color. The administration found out and apparently she had to repaint it the original color, hence why we had access to the paint cans. She was very odd, but that didn't work, much to our disappointment. Story 24. Here's a couple. One was a bag of her own hair. Her mom's boyfriend of the week was deploying to Iraq, and the mom cut off a lock of her hair for him to take. She decided to do the same, but cut off more than a lock, and by the time I got the scissors and bag away from her, she had cut off half her hair. I felt pretty sorry for her. Her mom was quite a piece of work. This was about the tamest thing her mom had done. One that's a little lighter is a butter knife and pirate-themed duct tape. This girl had a balloon and another student had threatened to pop the balloon to mess with her, and then she threatened to cut him with her knife. It took about 20 minutes of hemming and hawing to find out what she had brought the butter knife to school because she wanted to decorate her backpack with the duct tape. One more time, I was in one of my most difficult years. This class was out of control, and it was everything I could do to hold it together emotionally for the whole day. One day I was finding rubber bands everywhere. Kids were shooting them and throwing them and making all kinds of chaos with them. I thought someone was taking rubber bands from my desk. When I finally confronted the kid I suspected, he opened up his backpack and he had one of those 1,000 rubber band bags. I'm glad I got him when I did. Story 25. It wasn't quite taken away because the kid came to me, but the most realistic BB gun I've ever seen. The kid came up to me before school started and was like, "Mr. Stoneheart, I made a mistake. I accidentally brought my gun to school and he sees my reaction. A toy! A toy! It's not real! He didn't get in trouble. He had divorced parents and was moving it from one house to the other over the weekend, but forgot to take it out of his bag. I stopped him from taking it out on the yard and brought him to the office. It was completely metal, no plastic, no orange tip, and heavy. I just stored it there until his mom could come and pick it up. Luckily, our school did not have a bullcrap zero tolerance policy, and add on the fact that he came to me before school started and didn't try to hide it, and I made sure that he received no punishment. I did reinforce the necessity of being careful with such things. Like if it happened where I went to middle school, he would have been immediately suspended. But it was an honest mistake. I kind of accidentally did the same thing, except I had a very cheap and obviously from Walmart colored airsoft gun. I was 9 years old, it was completely by accident, and I got kicked out of school, and I never got my airsoft gun back. Gosh dang it. Story 26. I don't know if this counts, but my first job in education was as a dorm dad at a high school in a ski town. I came in one time after a day of teaching, walk up to my room, and notice that there is an exceptional amount of laughter coming from a particular room. In and of itself, the laughter was not a red flag. However, coming from this particular, incredibly lovable craphead's room, I was skeptical. I did the standard knock 3 times in case someone wasn't clothed and then entered. Yeah, the students had an effing sugar glider that they had bought. It was running all over the room as the students looked at me like this was absolutely the best thing that they had ever seen. I don't think there was any amount of prep that could have given me a playbook for this, but as a 24-year-old first year, I sure as crap didn't know what to do. Long story short, there actually were 2 sugar gliders in the room. One was put in a kennel and spent a few hours in my room until animal control came. The other escaped, ran around the dorm for a few hours, and was eventually apprehended. The students were upset. Apparently, sugar gliders aren't cheap. Story 27. I got this. I used to be an English teacher in Thailand. Nicknames are a big thing. Poo means crab, and it's used for diminutive children. There is a famous island called Koh Phi Phi, pronounced like pee-pee. I walked into my 4th grade class one day and I hear shouting. I see Pooh and Pee-Pee going at it. Pooh had pulled out his X-Acto blade, think box cutter, on Pee-Pee and had drawn blood. Not a huge amount, just a cut on the arm. I rushed over and pulled them apart. I took the blade and brought them to the office. The principal patted Pooh on the head and told me no worries, boys will be boys, and sent us all back to class and told me to give the blade back to Pooh, not wanting to upset his parents. The next day, I got in trouble from the head teacher, saying I shouldn't involve the principal in such trivial matters as it could cause him to lose face. To sum up, I was nearly fired for taking a weapon from Pooh for attacking Pee-Pee. Story 28. I wasn't the teacher, but I'm sure this will be high on the list. I was in the lunchroom after finishing my lunch and waiting for recess in elementary school. Close by was a small collection of boys that were looking at something that one kid from my class, I'll call him Mark, was taking out of his pocket. I was curious, so I looked over and saw him pushing the black lid of a jar back into his pocket. I asked to see too, and he pulled out the jar once more. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but it looked like a small piece of meat of some kind. I remember that it stuck to the bottom of the jar, and even though he shook the jar while he removed it from his pocket, the meat didn't move inside. As I was looking at it, a teacher came by and demanded to know what it was that Mark had. He tried to shove it back in his pocket but couldn't get it in fast enough. The teacher took it away from him, couldn't seem to identify it, and said that he could have it back at the end of the day. I later asked him what it was. The only thing he said was that his cat was recently neutered. Story 29. Okay, so not a teacher. We had milk bags for lunch. America, don't ask. And they would force us to take one even if we weren't going to drink it, so many kids would give them to me. I used to have an obsession with milk, so one day we had a sub right after lunch, and like usual, I was given milk, leftover food in containers, the works. So I walk in last, but not late. With all my pockets, they were combat guy pants with at least 7 pockets, filled with milk, cereal boxes, the mini bowl ones they give, and just random food packets. I think I had 2 bags of chips. My backpack was also filled with food as I would just eat throughout the entire day. So I sit down. No food in butt pockets. And I pull out a bag of milk. He looks at me strange because my pockets were bulging and my sweater was bulging as well. He starts class, and I've already gone through 2 bags of milk at this point. I keep the garbage to throw away later so I wasn't making a mess, and I open a bag of chips. He walks over and demands me to stand up. I do, and he tells me to empty all my pockets. I guess he was annoyed with the noise. I start piling food and milk onto my desk, and by the time I'm done, half of it had to go to another chair because there was at least 25 bags of milk. He tells me to throw it all away. I told him no because it'd be wasting food. So he brings the trash can over, and I throw my sweater over all of it and pick it up kind of like a hobo bag. He then proceeds to take my sweater away from me with the food and dumps it in the trash can. The can had recently been dumped, so it wasn't dirty, but this female dog threw away my effing sweater and my food. Someone got a teacher from next door, and I got my food and stuff back eventually, but I know for a fact that had to be the weirdest thing he had taken from someone since he started teaching. I have no words. Story 30. This was told to my class by my chemistry teacher, but I saw the event while sitting outside the school building waiting for first period to start. Seniors that year rigged up a good prank by stacking picnic tables on top of the 1-story English building. On top sat one of those benches from McDonald's where you can sit next to a plastic version of Ronald McDonald. The janitor decided to disassemble it by pushing the McDonald's bench off the roof. Bench falls down and it hits the ground just right to nearly sever Ronald McDonald's head. Someone ran out of chem classroom with a knife and fully severed it, then retreated back to my teacher's classroom, holding it like a prize. Later on, there was an announcement for the chem teacher to come to the office with the head. So I guess this is actually a story about what adults had to take away from the teacher, really. Story 31. Not a teacher, but thought this was worth sharing. I went to an upper middle class high school with a tradition of annual administration-approved senior pranks. That didn't really qualify as pranks, putting saran wrap on the trees in front of the school and things like that. My sophomore year, a group of seniors decided they wanted to have a Hunger Games-themed water gun Nerf weapon fight in the main hallway. Accounts differ on what was said when, but I understand the administration kept going back and forth on whether this would be allowed at all and what weapons could be used. Of course, whatever the final word was didn't matter. The fight happened at the pre-planned time, and it was absolute chaos. I heard that some people had water balloons and balloons filled with urine, and one guy threw a bag of flour over a balcony. Not surprisingly, that was the last year senior pranks were allowed. In fact, the administration was so paranoid about something like that happening again that the last week of my junior year, we weren't even allowed to bring backpacks to school. Early in the morning on the last Wednesday of the school year, one of the seniors, wearing a gorilla suit, stood in front of our high school passing out bananas for people to carry around. For the first half of the day, probably a third of the school was carrying bananas through the halls and just sitting with them in class. In 5th period, the principal got on the announcements and ordered teachers to confiscate the bananas. Oh, come on, man, that banana one's harmless. Story 32. Not a teacher, but I used to work in K-12 IT. This story was told to me there by several different people and reportedly happened not long after before I started my first K-12 job. Too good not to share. There was a kid stealing the heavy roller balls out of mice for the computers in the lab. Yes, I'm dating myself a bit here. Anyway, it gets reported and he gets sent to the dean's office. The dean doesn't quite understand the situation and tells the kid he knows he's got the mouse, and if he turns it in, he will be in much less trouble, and puts his hand out. Well, apparently the kid had a rather shocked look on his face, but proceeds to dig in his pocket and pull something out. He then places a live mouse, a rodent, in the dean's hand. For some reason, this kid had brought a pet frickin' mouse to school in his hoodie pocket and was stealing mouse balls from the lab. Hey, dude, you can't fault him. He's got a brand. Story 33. When I was a sub, McDonald's, it was just after lunch, and I guess their Uber Eats or whatever hadn't gotten to them in time. I thought I caught them out of the corner of my eye a few times looking at their phone. They asked to go to the bathroom and came back 10 minutes later with nothing. 10 minutes after that, they asked to go to the nurse. I don't know if that district had a policy, but I always let them go to the nurse when they ask. I would document it for the teacher, of course. At this point, I did not trust them, but again, I did not gatekeep the nurse. In that district, you would write a pass for them and the nurse or office or wherever would sign it and put a time on it. When she came back from the nurse, she did not have her signed and timed pass. She had lost it. She did have a bag of McDonald's. I took the McDonald's, of course, but it was still her property. Fortunately, a campus monitor poked his head into the classroom to check on the sub. I gave him a quick rundown and he offered to hold on to the food until after school when she could pick up her cold burger. Of course, I gave her teacher a full write-up. I let the kids get away with a good bit when I was a sub as long as they were working more than they weren't. At the same time, when you lie that obviously, you need to learn not to lie or to lie better. Story 34. In my elementary school, the school had a made-up currency system called tickets. Just small sheets of paper with the mascot printed on them. Each was worth one ticket, colored blue, and could be collected through good behavior. These would be spent at a cart that came around to every classroom every Friday with toys, books, and school supplies. Two kids, I'll call them Kenny and Kevin, had a bet with each other to see who could collect the most tickets over the course of 3 school years. This was also at the height of the Pokemon trading card craze, and Kevin capitalized on this hard. He sold all of his cards for tickets to get ahead in the game. Before the 3 years were up, they'd collected so much that by the time they were investigated, they had bricks of these tickets all held together with rubber bands and stashed in their desk. It totaled up in the thousands. I was so upset when they were taken away, and from that point there was a ticket limit enforced per student. Not anything weird, but the ambition motivates me to this day. Story 35. So I scrolled through this feed for a very, very long time, and I couldn't find anything close to what I was looking for. I'm not a teacher, but I have 2 schools that will forever remember this incident. To this day, over 7 years later, my father has a voicemail on his phone. Mr. Blank, I'm calling from your daughter's vocational school today to inform you that she is being suspended starting tomorrow. This is the punishment resulting in us confiscating wait, what? Really? Dear God. Severed head from her bag. Please call me back. My science teacher, my regular high school, had just found out I was doing taxidermy. He asked me to bring one of my projects in and he would make a mini lesson out of it. So I brought in a dried, preserved, sanitized rabbit head. Vocational school wasn't happy. Science teacher yelled at my vocational principal to get the head back, and the story was told at graduation. Story 36. I have not been in a classroom for 15 plus years, but I taught pre-K for a little while. I had to keep an eye on the kids in the bathroom because it was just 3 toilets in a room, and the girls would clog the toilets with mountains of toilet paper, and the boys thought it was hilarious to pee on each other. I heard giggling from the boys' room, so I peek in. 2 3-year-old boys are smacking each other with bright green glow-in-the-dark dildos, laughing their butts off. They were playing Star Wars. I had to confiscate the dildos. Mom was super embarrassed. I was trying so hard not to laugh while handing her a bag discreetly, telling her what had happened. She had no idea they were missing or that her kid knew where they were, and that he had climbed on a chair to get them out of a shoebox on top of her closet. Then I had to tell the other parent, a single dad, who also thought it was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Luckily, because that could have gone poorly, the kids will never know, probably anyway, that they weren't playing with oddly shaped lightsabers. Still funny, Too Long Didn't Read ruined a game of Star Wars by stealing glow-in-the-dark dildos. Story 37. When I taught at my first school, the principal was weirdly evil. The population was mostly inner-city kids on free lunch. The principal, let's call him Dr. Garcia, used to hate seeing kids playing after school while waiting for their bus. We served the entire county, and sometimes the bus for some wouldn't arrive until almost 6 p.m. Dr. Garcia would take the footballs away from these super poor kids and throw them onto the roof of the school. If it was high school kids, he'd ask me to do it because he was a coward. I never did, and I left less than a year from when he started. He actually got demoted, but not for that. But to answer the question, I took away about 3 knives, some 7th graders' ecstasy, and a pistol. We had to just do that sort of thing because the immediate danger of waiting for the resource officer may be too much, and most of the kids trusted teachers more than police. Once, a girl gave me a live chicken in a Build-A-Bear box. Story 38. Not a teacher, but my friend in high school got a toaster taken away. He pulled up in a parking lot next to me while I was hotboxing the F out of my old Grand Caravan and asked if I wanted toast. Obviously, I did. Tried plugging into his sister's truck with an adapter, but not enough juice. Walked into the gym and asked the coach supervising bus intake if we could plug it in there, but got shut down. Asked a few other teachers and knocked on some doors, but nobody would let us make toast in their rooms. Got fed up and unplugged a vending machine in the hall and started toasting on the floor next to it when one of my least favorite teachers noticed us and yelled about it and took the toaster and the bread. Best part was at the end of the day announcement, "Student name, please report to the front office to pick up your mother's toaster." Pretty much guaranteed his notoriety for it. Story 39. I'm a teacher, but this is a personal one. When I was in 4th grade, my friends and I started bringing those little plastic army men to school. Since you could get a whole pack of them at the dollar store, we would put them in little mock battles inside our deck. It had that cubby thing underneath it. Naturally, the army men came in tan and green back then. One day, I set up an ambush of the tan guys ambushing the green guys. My teacher noticed and threw a huge fit. I was oblivious to the fact that the war in Iraq had just started and my teacher's brother or someone was in the U.S. Army and had been deployed to Iraq. She was furious, and it was this whole big fiasco where I had to meet a few administrators and my parents had to come to school. I think they were pretty lenient though, because I had no idea that there was a war going on. Never mind what tan guys ambushing green guys was supposed to represent back then. It's kind of haunting to remember that I had friends from high school who got deployed to Afghanistan. That's how long that whole fiasco went on for. Story 40. Not a teacher, but I was a handful as a teen. While I was in high school one year, my parents had given me an assortment of fake crap for Christmas. Yes, like actual fake poop. I was a really cute girl, but things like this are why boys didn't have crushes on me. I was effing weird. Now, I'd built a strong enough rapport with most of my teachers that as long as I wasn't being disruptive, my pranks and jokes were all well met. So I took my favorite turd to school to prank the teachers I knew would be cool with it. What I did was set it in their desk chair before the start of class and spray it with some body spray I had for that wet look. Yeah, I was, and mostly still am, pretty disgusting. They all went over well. One of my teachers saw it, jumped, and said, "Dinkley, get that crap!" They didn't even have to ask who it was. Where I effed up was loaning it to a friend to use on his physics teacher. Apparently, his teacher thought it was real and got really angry. Then when he figured out it was fake, he demanded to know who did it so he could send them to the office. No one snitched, but he also kept my favorite crap as a result. Edit. I was a sophomore in high school and either 16 or 17 years old. I was nearly a dang legal adult. I don't think there's an age limit on crappy pranks. Story 41. This is not my story, but it's worth sharing. My wife's first principal, wonderful family friend now and retired college provost, was a no-nonsense administrator. We'll call him Mark for this story. They worked at a large urban middle school in the early 90s. She would come home with some crazy stories, but one tops them all. A middle school girl who spent lots of time in the principal's office for all kinds of things that had really gone off. Apparently started a fight and in the midst of the melee, took off her prosthetic arm and used it essentially as a bat on the other kid. Well, Mark doesn't mess around. Calls her into the office and he takes the kid's arm away from her. Apparently she was incensed, dropping some language and, "Give me my arm back." I guess he calmly told her she could have it back when her parents came to get it, and he hung it on the coat hook in his office. Can't imagine this would go over well these days, but Mark never messed around. So yeah, weirdest thing taken here was an arm. Story 42. Had a kid who was obsessed with keeping food in his pockets. Pocket bagels, pocket hot dogs, pocket crushed chip crumbs. Another kid I worked with was known to have knives on his person. He wanted to get through metal detectors without setting them off, so he began sharpening sticks and keeping those on him. The winner, though, is the special ed student who brought a knife to school. His rationale was that students were told not to bring toys and phones to school, and people still did, so knives were probably okay too. He had a big collection at home of knives he'd found all over the neighborhood. We had a meeting, determined he didn't really understand the rule and wouldn't be expelled for bringing a weapon, but we would need to search him every day. So here I am a month later looking through his backpack when he says, "Don't look in my front pocket." Upon looking in the front pocket, I pull out a steak knife. He starts crying his eyes out, saying he was trying to do the right thing. I'm very confused and ask what he means. He explains that he stole it from a teacher that had used it with their lunch, felt bad, and wanted to bring it back. Had to explain to his little brother about a week later that he couldn't look at pictures of the pink Power Ranger adult content at school. Kid had dozens of tabs open. He kind of has a fair argument with him rationalizing the toys and phones still being brought to school, especially if there wasn't a heavy emphasis on the knives. It's either no nonsense or some nonsense. Story 43. I'm a gym teacher, and it happened before I got there, but my fellow coworker had my eyes bug out. As a PE teacher, you take attendance and then head to the locker rooms to dress out. We have a strict no book bag policy in the gym. Well, this student brought his book bag anyways. We told him to leave it in the hallway. He was adamant that he could not. My buddy was like, fine, keep it in the corner. Well, throughout class, he's in the corner constantly. My buddy realizes this is now weird. He asks, what's in the bag? He refuses to let my buddy know. Well, he calls school security. The school security guy opens the book bag and screams, "What the F?" Well, the WTF was warranted because the student brought a python to school in his book bag. Story 44. Not a teacher, but a student. Had my world's hottest chocolate bar confiscated. Broke off a piece for a friend that wasn't in my lunch, but the second period before my lunch, so he could still try it. He wimped out, but the whole bar isn't 1 inch by 1 inch divided by 12, so I couldn't put it back. 2 edgy girls wanted it, and I clearly told them and showed them the box and the Scoville scale. They wanted it, so I split the 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter square in half for them. They ate it and soon ran out of the class and never came back for their bags. Got called down right before lunch for suspected drug poisoning/OD. Turns out the 2 girls ran to the bathroom and projectile vomited everywhere for about 30 minutes until some poor soul walked in and reported it. Turns out the edgy girls were known for doing drugs and figured I was their dealer and gave them a bad batch. I did not. I gave them chocolate. I got chocolate taken away, but thank God I had the label on the chocolate bar and was able to show them I bought it from VAT 19. Never got to eat that chocolate bar, though. Perhaps for the better, huh? Story 45. I'm not a teacher, but a student. Senior year, my group of friends were able to sneak a bright pink dildo and put it in another friend's bag so it would be the first thing he sees when he opens his backpack. So, second period comes around and we're all snickering in the back of the class as we wait for him to open his bag, and he eventually does. He takes a look in the bag and starts cracking up at the dildo, and the teacher asks him, what's he laughing at? He slowly grabs the dildo and raises it up for the teacher to see, as the rest of the friend group in the back of the classroom is dying from laughter. There seem to be a lot of dildo stories at school. Is this a normal thing? Story 46. Not a teacher, but was a youth leader in a volunteer capacity. At a camp, kids unpacking their bags and sleeping bags in the large bunk bedrooms, one girl pulls out a long roll of condoms. For reference, this was a group of kids aged 8 to 10, boys and girls. Said girl was completely unfazed. Oh, these must be my mom's. Must have forgotten they were in the bag. Girl's mom was a single mother and from the looks of it enjoyed a healthy sex life and was obviously frank about it with her daughter. Kudos to her, I say. However, most kids of that age, particularly the boys, were not quite so worldly or mature about it. Had to grab it from her quick smart before it caused a mini riot. Popped it back discreetly in the girl's bag right before the end of the camp. Not so much weird as unexpected and hilarious. Story 47. I'm not a teacher, but I've had some weird crap I've brought or found in school that was confiscated. In 4th grade, I got a little toy turtle from the mystery box, or whatever it was called for being good at the end of the week. I named it George. Fast forward to 9th grade, and I still have it. My friends in class are all organized in a line for some reason, so we're passing it like notes, trying to get our teacher to take it. She eventually asks for the note, and my buddy just hands her the note and tells her its name is George and to be nice. I got it back at the end of the class. I still have George. I also collected unused plastic forks and spoons and such and hid them around my teacher's classroom with a friend. We put them on her chair and in her desk when she left. We cleaned it up, but it was still funny when we hid one and she found it a few months later in her desk. I had a giant kazoo taken from me because it distracted people. My teacher eventually let me play it if I promised to keep it in my backpack later. I also borrowed, well, they didn't get them back, but I asked first, friends' pads, drew a smiley face with red Sharpie and stuck them to things. My teacher confiscated 2 of the red birds, as I called them, and I never got them back. Story 48. It's not super weird, but more funny. My first year teaching, 5th and 6th grade math at the time, I just brought all of the older books I had at home to my classroom for early finishers to read or borrow. I had a book of college football stadiums that I brought because I thought some of the kids might find it interesting, and they did. Most of the kids that got it would look through it once and then put it back like you'd imagine. One student got to where he would get done with his work super fast and then rush to make sure he got that book. This went on every day for a couple of weeks until I finally decided to ask if the stadiums were really that interesting to him. I will never never forget the smile on his face as he looked up at me and said, "No, coach, I only look at the ones that show the cheerleaders." I didn't take it away from him then, but I did take it out of the classroom and bring it back to my own bookshelf at home where it's sat ever since. I'm really thinking about giving it to him as a graduation present in a few years, if I don't forget. I moved up to 7th and 8th grade math the following year and currently have him as an 8th grader, so there's a few more years before that happens. Story 49. My mom was a vice principal in high school for a number of years, so here's a short list. Homemade vape, hundreds of actual vapes, hentai drawings, and yes, it was adult content drawings, not just a girl with her boobs out, switchblade that is illegal to own in Canada, alcohol in water bottles, alcohol in lockers, drugs of almost every variety, a kid was using a school laptop to jailbreak iPhone, so that was taken away, and a kid who had a little box of table salt in his locker. That last one is actually kind of interesting. I'm sure most of us played Bloody Knuckles as kids, right? Stupid little game to show how tough you were or some bullcrap like that. Well, the thing at my mom's school for a bit was to take an ice cube, put salt on the back of your hand, and to see who could hold the ice there the longest. Too long didn't read. They are giving themselves effing chemical burns. Really effed a few kids up too. So yeah, this kid was like the judge of the whole craze. Kids would bring ice cubes in their water bottles and he would pour salt on it and then hold it down on their hand or chest or wherever they wanted till they tapped out. Oh, I wish I wasn't so stubborn as a kid to win all those stupid competitions. It sucked. There was so much pain. But the pride, it was a nice high. Story 50. I was in 6th grade in 1979 to 1980, and the biggest kid, man-child, in our school of about 500 to 600 students brought in a 1911 45. I saw him in the lunchroom holding it up to show one of the deans who was looking at it with genuine interest. There was nothing that ever happened and school went on as usual. I also had a 5th grade teacher who at the end of the year, cleaning out the classroom, threw away a bottle of mercury. I found it in the garbage and took it home not knowing what it was. It was literally about a jigger full an amount that I played with it in the kitchen on the floor for hours and lost much of it all over after. I remember a time while in college where a student in the chemistry lab spilled a very small amount and they closed the whole building for 3 to 4 days for a hazmat crew to clean it up. Story 51. On my orchestra trip when I was in 10th grade, the orchestra teacher had to take away a head of cabbage that one girl had bought. She started eating the cabbage head like an apple, but then started waking everyone else on the bus with bits of the cabbage head peeled off. It was the funniest thing ever. The teacher wasn't too pleased though. I'd never seen him so mad before then. He didn't have to take this away, but at the same time, one of my friends bought a huge cucumber, like 1.5 feet long, and proceeded to eat the entire thing. Apparently, my orchestra had a thing for vegetables. Story 52. Not a teacher, but a student. This happened last year, in 11th grade. We were about to have an event the next day, so most of the teachers were busy setting things up. Our class started at 8, so most of us are at school at 7. We were informed that the teachers are busy doing things for the incoming event and that they won't be giving lectures that day, so we spent the next 5 hours doing weird stuff. One dude decided to pull out a condom and poured some M&Ms in it. Another guy poured Skittles that he brought from the cafeteria. I joined in and poured half a bottle of Coca-Cola. We then tied the opening of the condom to close it and played with it. One of our subject teachers passed by and saw the condom. She confiscated it. The 3 of us got suspended for a week. I remember the teacher getting weird looks while walking down the hallway carrying a bag of condoms with M&M Skittles and Coke in it. Sorry for the bad grammar. English is not my first language. Story 53. 2 come to mind. The first wasn't really more of a confiscation, but, well, let's call it what it is. Blackmail. I had this student. Let's call her Jamie. She only ever came to school because she loved playing softball, but she was consistently causing me problems, not just with her own learning, but because she was very pleasant to look at and had problems basking in all the attention that got her. Anyway, my wife was a substitute teacher at that time, and one morning I woke up super sick. We were having a test day, so I asked my wife, "Hey, just go in for me." Dang, I miss those days. She wrote Mrs. S. blank on the board, a last name which we share, introduced herself, and then handed out the test. She brought Jamie's home for me to read, and it said, "Mr. S. Oh my gosh, did you get a sex change? The person at the front of the class says her name is Mrs. S, and I don't think she looks like you in a wig or anything, but I can't say for sure because I'm just crazy high right now, and I don't know what's real." I made a copy of it, which I showed to her the next day when I got back. I told her, "Get your crap together, or the original finds its way into your coach's mailbox." I didn't say anything else or even specify quantify what getting her crap together entailed. She was only a junior that year, but she did, in fact, get her crap together. To everyone's surprise but mine, she graduated and even went to community college. She got married, she's got 3 cute kids. I maintain I performed a service. The second was more icky. I found a couple kids huddled over a sheet of paper and giggling. That's never good. I went to see what it was, and they had found something that students in my previous period had left behind. They had been sending intimate texts, but like on paper, with very descriptive words, both adjectives and verbs. Why they would do it on paper? I'm not a stickler for phones, but even worse, leave it behind is beyond me. And I'm not trying to judge or shame or anything, but I was never able to look at the authors of the note the same way. Story 54. Not a teacher, but in the 7th grade, my English teacher caught me looking at lewd and highly suggestive images of Dante from Devil May Cry. There was no nudity, so I only got a warning. Then fast forward to sophomore year of high school, I had the same teacher for English again since she got transferred to the high school after having an affair with the other middle school English teacher. My friends and I decided to use an empty notebook for text role-playing. Very, very gay and detailed handwritten text role-playing. We shared this notebook between 4 people and had multiple original and fan characters in it. I went to hand it back to my friend and the teacher snatched it. She clearly started to read it before getting this WTF expression and slowly handed it back. She didn't even say anything to either of us. She just sat back at her desk, questioning her life choices. Story 55. Alcohol is one thing we've had to confiscate. Lots of teens try to get away with being high at school, either alcohol, weed, or worse, depending on the school. However, this kind of stuff isn't exclusive to public schools. I know of plenty of private schools with drugs and alcohol problems as well. Money just hides the issues better. I had a funny experience the other day teaching performance class to 12 and 13-year-olds. The game was based around a circle and making nouns with letters of the alphabet with their bodies freezing in a position, gradually getting into groups of 2. As the kids were getting into the game, one girl getting excited about the prospect of working with friends says, "Can we have a threesome?" At which point, to save the girl embarrassment, I turned around and focused on some of the other students and to stop myself from laughing. All the while, her friends had heard what she had said and told her of her faux pas and were laughing about it. I eventually turned around, once gaining my own composure, and instructed them to, "Come on, get it together," and moved on with the lesson. Without a doubt, one of the funniest things I've heard a student say without thinking about what they were saying. Story 56. I work at a library in the children's section. We get a lot of unattended kids after school. Most are from an elementary school that comes over as soon as school is ended, and they are there until their folks pick them up. I have found a gun, a wig, nude photos of like a year old, scented color slime that was thrown at the ceiling, bag of cold cooked spaghetti, their siblings, a school book filled with poop, dead animals, hamsters, wasps, nest, dead pets, goldfish, bags of ice with blood on them, yeah, multiple of those, cardboard boxes, boxes of paper clips, the strands of their enemies' weave that they just pulled out of their hair, big sections of it, a weird brochure on why white people are better than people of color, most personally disturbing, and the remains of a dead wild duck. I didn't realize kids went so hard in the paint at the library. Goodness gracious. Story 57. Not a teacher, but when I was in 11th grade, there were 2 other Muslim students who attended the private Catholic school I was in. We were in religion class, and this kid, who's now a prominent dentist in Nova, was asking weird questions about Christianity. The teacher paused for a sec and asked him what was in his lap. The room got quiet, and the kid seemed to want to move on from his little Q&A session. The teacher walked over and asked him to hand it over, so the kid handed him a book. The teacher flashed the book to the class, and it was titled 99 Contradictions of Christianity. All the other kids expressed a mix of emotions, but myself and the other Muslim kid were upset because we were always associated with each other. Story 58. I work as a para in a high school. I have confiscated special rocks, pieces of brick and concrete, switches pulled from trees, pieces of broken glass, tiny pieces of plastic from their mouths. The list goes on, and of course it always sucks when we have to take away a beloved toy or Pokemon card or something because it's a distraction. I always give it back at the end of the day, but I don't like taking it. However, the oddest confiscation story I have comes from when I was a junior in high school. The graduating senior class above me went out and bought hundreds of goldfish, planning to put one in each of the school's toilets as their senior prank. They were caught, thankfully, before they could mass murder a crap ton of goldfish. The administration made them all set up at the front of the school and give the fish away to students as they walked in. I managed to get one and took him home in a Dixie cup, got him a nice big tank, and kept him for 3 years. You kept a goldfish alive for 3 years? That's like a whole other level of responsibility, or luck. Story 59. Not weird, but I thought it was cute. This was like in 2005, so it's been a while, but it was these notebooks that a friend of mine in 5th grade wrote a story on. She loved to write stories and one day thought it would be a good idea to write a story about her and her crush, who was in the same class as us. Nothing racy, just these little cute romantic chapters about these two characters and some other sub-characters based on actual people in the class. She wrote each chapter in this spiral notebook at home or during recess, and our friend circle would read them in turns during classes every time she finished a chapter. Well, her story was a hit, and soon other girls in the class got to read the chapters and loved them and wanted to know when the next chapter would come out. The only rule was that none of the boys in the class were allowed to read that notebook. So naturally, the boys started getting curious of this notebook that has been going around, including her crush. They did these spy missions of trying to peek behind while some other girl was reading it, and soon after caught wind of how many names were pretty close to the names of the two people in class. Hannah, my writer friend, was Anna in the story, and Philip, her crush, was Philson in the story. Anna's love interest, well, see, she was a shy girl, and when the boys caught wind of the names and main characters of the story, they started teasing them together, and she was so embarrassed beyond words. She proceeded to avoid any of the boys teasing her, but still continued to write because we convinced her she was doing well and to not care about them. One day, while we were reading a new chapter, one of his friends said it was creepy how she's writing all these fantasies down when she doesn't even have a chance with them. She proceeded to cry, which turned this into a whole scene of our friend group arguing with the boys during recess. Our homeroom teacher caught wind of the commotion and decided that it was just best to confiscate the notebooks. She had filled up about 3 notebooks of handwritten chapters to quell the growing boys versus girls sentiment in the classroom. She ignored him and his friend for the rest of the year and moved on to secretly crush on some other guy in a different class. She also took her story writing to a blog she had online instead of the notebooks. Ah, that's kind of adorable. And you can totally see why young boys would be so bent out of shape about it. If you let them read it, they would have never had an interest. But as soon as there's a "no boys allowed," oh, the mission has begun. Story 60. What I can think of is a bottle of soda. But the fact that makes it weird is that they brought from the trash can. Seriously, my previous college, as he did a class before, threw a bunch of stuff the kids were eating for a cooking class. However, as the hour was at noon and they seemed tired, they picked up the bottle and started to drink it like a tribe or something. I was lecturing and they simply refused to throw it away again. When I literally snatched it from a girl drinking it, I learned that they mixed it with alcohol and were getting drunk. The kids were 14 years old at a rural middle school around 6 miles from my home. The director talked with the parents, but since then the group hated me, and I thankfully left that job when my time expired with them. Story 61. Not a teacher, but in my days at school, the weirdest things confiscated were a whole roast rotisserie chicken. A guy we knew was just always eating, and one day he had a full chicken in his school bag from Tesco and was just ripping bits off and eating it slyly in the class throughout the day. He actually made it 3 classes in before a teacher noticed, and only because a bunch of us ended up having chunks and it became obvious. A crowbar. A kid threatened to unalive his ex-girlfriend with a crowbar via text and sent a picture of a crowbar in his bag. It freaked her out, as you'd imagine, and she reported it to the school, who did nothing, and then she called the police, who came into our math class and took the kid out of class. It later turned out that he did indeed bring a crowbar into our math class and had made multiple threats to unalive her. We had a locked compound at the back of the school where he got rewarded for this by not having to wear a school uniform and only having to come into 10 to 2 and getting his qualifications done by a TA, and being allowed to take smoke breaks during class. Story 62. I had to take a dead snake preserved in a jar from one of my students. I don't know what substance it was suspended in, and I didn't care to find out. One of my co-teachers had to confiscate a pair of dentures from her student. The worst part was there were dentures from Mommy's one-night stand, and that kid apparently tried to mow the grass with them because they were absolutely disgusting. Dude came by to grab his teeth and didn't even wash them before slapping them back in his mouth and leaving. Last one was the worst. Bunch of students were chewing something, not sure what it was, assuming it was gum, made them spit it out. It was condoms. One of the kids apparently got into their parents' condom stash and for some ungodly reason figured, yeah, these are good for chewing on, and then handed some out to their friends in class. Story 63. I was the student who had this confiscated, but a petition, that's what I called it at least, that stated the Wiggles sucked. Like 50 people had signed their names on it too, because I was asking literally everyone I walked past. I was so proud of how many signatures I had. This was in like 5th grade, and I think it had something to do with proving a point to my brother, but I don't remember the exact reason. I was a super weird kid, in case that wasn't clear. But this is the really funny part. Before I had left that morning, I asked my mom to sign it, which of course she did. She wrote a whole little note too, and I don't remember all of it, but it definitely contained the line, "The Wiggles smell," and she wrote out her full name and did a big fancy signature. I didn't even get in trouble for it that much at school beyond having it taken away, but when I told my mom the vice principal had confiscated it, she was upset because she was so effing embarrassed. I went to a tiny private school, so the vice principal knew like almost every single student and parent very well, including my mother. Like he would personally call our house whenever there was a snow day. I just remember my mom repeating, "I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe I wrote the Wiggles smell," over and over in between the scolding I was getting. To be fair, the Wiggles kinda smell. I take that back. I don't tolerate any Wiggle slander. Story 64. An iron. The student rushed out of the house in the morning and brought the iron to school with him. Homeroom is starting. I am at the desk taking attendance, and he and 2 other boys are standing in the back corner with a desk they dragged over. I ask them to take a seat. There is a strange vibe going down, and as I proceed with the attendance, I am aware that the students are acting strange. I ask the boys what is going on. Of course, they say nothing and try to build a body wall. I head to the corner where I find the hidden boy is ironing his shirt on the desk. I swear he said he didn't want to look wrinkled and ragged all day. He said he would finish and put the iron away. Don't report me, but I ironed the shirt for him. I was afraid he would burn himself. Then I put the iron behind my desk and told him to pick it up at 3 o'clock. The class was sworn to secrecy. True story. Story 65. Live 5.56 millimeter ammunition. Now bear in mind, in the UK we don't have guns. At most, farmers have shotguns. There's a few hundred specialist license holders for guns out of 70 million people, but it's beyond rare to see ammunition. The possession of just this is mandatory 5 years in prison. Seriously, look up gun control in the UK. It's seriously draconian. This school had an army cadets attached to it. This one kid was a kleptomaniac, and whenever the cadets were taken shooting at nearby army range by regular soldiers who ran the whole thing, the kid was pocketing a piece of ammunition. He was using the tools in design and technology to strip them down to get the powder out. He had a couple of dozen rounds. This was in the 90s in North UK, and we were targets in the provisional IRA. The school had been closed more than once by bomb threats. Thankfully, the head and smart soldier dealt with it internally. Of the police had been involved, a close-to-retirement soldier would have got eved, and a kid who was purely inquisitive and inventive likely would have gotten detained in youth custody. It's called a mandatory sentence, and judges have had to apply it before now. They cannot go below the 5 years. Story 66. I didn't personally take this thing away, but my coworker did. Middle school kid came to school with a pencil box and was carrying it suspiciously. Before being dismissed for the day, students usually sit on the bleachers in the gym while waiting for other buses to arrive. This kid kept turning his back and hunching over like he is holding something precious. Teachers didn't do anything at first, just thought he was being a typical weird middle school kid. Later I find out that in his classes, other students would hear him look down at his desk and was talking to something. A student reported it and found out that this kid had been carrying a house mouse all day. He admitted he found it at home and would carry it around, and sometimes even put it in his locker for a class break. The mouse was alive, and we released it to the wild. So they all thought he was just Brick from the middle, taking a class break. Class break. Story 67. I once saw a boy in my year group playing with his friends. They were all very into World War II at the time and enjoyed making tanks and planes from time. One of the boys has ASD, and although he was 12 at the time, he probably acted as if he was 8 or 9. Anyway, I walked over to see what they were up to, and the boy, let's call him Hugh, presented me with a tank that he had made. He had dissected a lever arch file and a pen and had sellotaped the pieces to a functioning vibrator. After gingerly confiscating the vibrating mass, trying to avoid touching the purple bits, I called his mom in for a meeting with me. Throughout the meeting, she denied having any knowledge of the toy and informed me that Hugh often goes out into the alley and rummages around in the rubbish people leave there. She called it hunting for treasure. I called it disgusting and recommended that she stops him from doing it in the future. At the end of the meeting, following further consistent, vehement denial of the object in question, I informed her that we would safely dispose of it. She told me that she didn't want it back anyway, realized what she had just said, and quickly made her exit. The item in question is currently in the fun drawer at an office and school, along with 2 tubes of strawberry lube, some vintage 1980s adult content, and a dozen canvas leaf-shaped lighters. Too long didn't read. I confiscated a homemade vibrator tank from a 12-year-old boy, then had to speak to his mom, the original owner, all about it. Story 69. A group of students took another student's journal after they finished a test. They proceeded to take turns drawing a motivational cat poster, the hang in there kind with a cat hanging on a ledge. The first couple students did a good job. The last one drew a chicken, longer than the cat itself, large breasts, and the caption, "Meow, mudda effer." The 3 of them kept laughing, so I got suspicious. I confiscated it, but it made me laugh so hard I couldn't bring myself to send any of them to the office. I still have it in my desk drawer several years later. Story 70. So many things over 2 decades. 1. Bullet casings. Kid went hunting over the weekend and forgot them in his coat till they fell out. He asked for them back so he could reload them. 2. 10-inch hunting knife. Different kid, same hunting season. 3. A textbook after a teenager bit through the cover. 4. Drug money. 5. A joint, a cigarette, and a book of matches. He asked if I was going to smoke them or if he'd get them back. Neither happened, but he did get the rest of the year off. 6. Adult content, so much adult content. 7. A full meal of Chinese takeout. She was upset I made her put it away. 8. Diabetic testing supplies. She was threatening to stab other students with them. All I can think of offhand. Story 71. Stuff I had taken from me. Tons of straws I'd grabbed off the playground and taped together. I was going to use them with some other kids to dig out of the school. I was 4 or 5 and the staff was not impressed. Power Rangers morphers. I would wear mine to school daily. I would not give them up without a fight either. I was 9 or 10. I was incredibly lonely and was throwing up multiple times every day from stress. I don't see why wearing one like a watch when I needed comfort was such a big issue. I didn't play with it. It was too noisy for class. Spent an entire year getting them pulled off me until I figured out if I just wear the turbo morpher key as a necklace, that would be good enough. Nearly got in trouble for having a knife when they found that one on me. How does a metallic car key become a knife? Books. So many books, it got ridiculous. My mom kept having to come in and get them back. I was happily reading those books at home, but my teachers refused to let me read them and told my mom off for letting me. What the heck was wrong with Buffy the Vampire Slayer books? So many other things, I don't remember them all now. I was a kid that couldn't sit still and focus. I'd get stuff taken off me constantly. Oh, one teacher would take my workbook off me so I couldn't finish my work too quickly. I was driving him insane and he tried to get me in trouble with my mom on Parents' Evening. It was hilarious when he told her I was pretending to finish and never wrote in complete sentences. He tried to find evidence of this in my workbook and found nothing. I had been able to tell my mom about this idiot. She didn't blow up at me and found the situation hilarious. I asked him if I could finally read or do homework when I finished my classwork. The answer was still no, so I just continued to drive him bonkers because it only ever took me about 5 minutes to finish everything. Story 72. Okay, not a teacher, so I hope it's okay I respond because I have a good one for this. I used to babysit my brother's kids a lot at his house. One night, I was busy for a bit putting the baby to sleep. The others were old enough that it was okay to leave them alone for a few minutes while I did that. When I came back downstairs, I discovered the middle child playing with Barbies. She had filled the toy bathtub with hair gel and made quite a big mess with it all over herself and the dolls. I told her off gently and helped her clean up the mess, she being too young to do it alone. It was then that I discovered it wasn't hair gel, but a bottle of lube they had left in the living room, presumably by accident. I still haven't told this story to any of my relatives to this day, and as far as they're concerned, I intend to take it to my grave. Story 73. A sweat-infused, I'm talking soggy and dripping, Pokemon card. The story. I teach 5th grade, 9 to 10 years old. Noticed that 2 students who usually got along very well were being quite cold towards each other, but I didn't think much of it. Both soft-spoken boys on the nerdy side, great students. Turns out they had engaged in a pretty complicated exchange of Pokemon cards. Then one of them realized he'd been swindled out of one of his best cards and wanted to renegotiate the deal. Other kid was threatening to sell and or destroy it. This was serious stuff. I asked if the card in question was at school. Yes. Okay, can I hold on to it until we get this figured out? Okay. He then bends over and starts untying his shoe. Why are you doing that? You said you wanted the card. The kid had put the card in the safest place he could think, inside his shoe, for 3 days, walking on it. Card was legit soggy and smelled like a high school boys' locker room. When I pointed out that the card was no longer playable, nor was it worth much to the local game stores, I was met with 2 completely blank stares. I don't remember what the card was, but it was a foil, and apparently worth $40 at the time. To a 5th grader, a fortune. Story 74. In 9th grade, I had a math class, and in the second week of school, the teacher was fired. The school had trouble filling the position, so we had a battery of teachers come through. A different one almost every week. They all wanted to review the previous lesson, so they all ended up teaching the same lesson over and over and over. Me and a buddy decided to start playing tic-tac-toe during class because we had already done the lesson. Well, because it took months to fill the position, we had our math binders filled with tic-tac-toe games. Thousands of games and a running score sheet. After a while, we started also playing this dot and line and box game. Had thousands of those too. Well, we finally got a strict new teacher. First class, we figured she wouldn't last and ignored her warnings, and she took our binders. She leafed through them real quick and threw them away and told us we couldn't have them back. We were shocked. We had spent so much time playing those games, it actually hurt to have it all taken away and thrown away so fast. Look, I mean, you can give them new binders and all, but thousands upon thousands of games of tic-tac-toe, you can't just erase that kind of history. That crap's important. Story 75. A gun. Had a teacher's aide whisper to me that the students were telling me the student had a gun. I called campus security and tried to stay in such close proximity that he couldn't take it out if he had it, before I could grab him. Security came in. Sure enough, he freaked out. Security and I cornered him. He threw the gun on the ground and took off running. I never saw him again. Police caught him and he was expelled. Allegedly, he brought it to school as a dare and never planned to use it. It wasn't loaded when we checked. Never had my heart beat like that in a situation. Story 76. In high school, I had this really laid-back teacher who covered a lot of classes in the science department. One day in our earth science class, we had a lab lesson for the day. He noticed a few of the guys leaning around the table in the back with the book open, giggling, and generally not being discreet. By the look on his face as he walked back there to confiscate it, he was definitely expecting something like an adult content magazine. It was an illustrated book about garden gnomes. The look of disbelief and confusion on his face as he flipped through it and only found gnomes was priceless. Story 77. A crossbow. It didn't have bolts with it and was most likely one you purchase in one of those odds and ends weapon stores with throwing stars and bow staffs. You see it in the malls and they're all going out of business. Quick backstory. 4th grade. Female. Pulled the handle out of her backpack to show a friend before getting on the bus to leave. I was on bus duty. Caught it out of the corner of my eye, thought it was a gun and ran over to grab it before anything could go down. Also took away a lighter from a 3rd grader who sprayed perfume into a locker of another girl she didn't like and lit her stuff on fire. Had to extinguish and smother a jacket fire with a backpack. Here's a list of other interesting items. Bag of weed, bag of sewing needles, a Nerf arrow with nails in the tip, was top heavy, would have never flown, an 8 or 9 inch piece of window glass wrapped with a t-shirt for the handle swung at myself and another staff member like a machete. Not a teacher during this time, still an education setting though. Bullets, a squirt gun with bleach in it, some weird dirty bomb thing that was connected to an old cell phone that was full of pellets, tax nails, and some other metal shavings. 10 years into the profession, and I still think there's nothing I'd rather be doing. You know, you really gotta love your job to serve on the front lines like this. Love to hear it. Story 78. Used to work as a TA for a bit a few years ago. We had a black market at school, and I feel like I was a huge part in making this possible. There was this kid that liked to sell crap to his fellow peers. Things that are usually forbidden to bring, we'll just call it contraband. Things like scissors, sodas, gums, chocolates, and many more assortments. This kid was a phenomenal salesman, and as I was quite young and hip and in need of some sugar after lunch, I decided to hit this kid up. He was one of my classmates, and we had basically figured out that he sold a few things, and to get some of that sugar. It was close and reliable, right? Thing is, he had a monopoly on this crap and could sell at whatever price he saw fit. I made him a deal. I'd look the other way if he sold it to me cheaper, which he was absolutely thrilled about. A A few months later, he actually had his own little group room next to his home classroom where he sold during lunch hours. He absolutely blew up in school. You wanted candy? He got it. You wanted probably the best assortments of sodas close to this hemisphere? He got it. He even had candy I'd never seen in my entire life. He had promotional items. This kid was 13 years old and one of the best businessmen I had ever seen. Unfortunately, one of the main teachers found out and shut him down very abruptly. I watched in the shadows. Story 79. Not a teacher, but back in the 7th or 8th grade, a bunch of us started collecting plastic water bottle caps to flick at each other, using our fingers so that they flew like frisbees. Each of us had to collect our own ammo, and some of the kids resorted to very strange methods of getting some. Personally, I avoided combat and scavenged off other fights or picked up ones that were flicked at me. We'd keep them in our pockets or lunch bags during breaks and store them in our main bags or at our desk when class time came. Eventually, the game just became too elaborate to just keep a secret. Two sides formed and it turned into an ammo hoarding race, and a teacher somehow found out about our planned final battle, and as soon as they found out, the head of discipline himself personally came to each class and searched every bag. He managed to collect at least 3 large garbage bags worth of plastic water bottle caps, and we were left off with a lecture about decency and a strong warning. I was kind of looking forward to the final battle, but hey, at least I have a story about that one time me and a bunch of students tricked ourselves into doing a crap ton of recycling for our school. Story 80. Not a teacher, but when I was in 4th grade, my auntie gave me wires and pliers and taught me jewelry wire working. Cue, little 10-year-old me showing up to school and making a bunch of clip-on nose rings. Basically just unclosed circles with ends curled so it didn't poke your skin, and selling them at 10 cents a piece to kindergartners through 8th grade. My friends thought it was hilarious to see 5-year-olds walking around with nose rings, and by the time the day was over, my little change purse was nicely filled. Needless to say, the principal of my very conservative Catholic school was outraged. He must have had a very fun time tracking down and confiscating every single one. Story 81. A walkie-talkie. All day, staff had been hearing strange things through the walkie-talkies. Random noises, a few phrases, and it became clear that a student had a walkie-talkie. Over the course of the day, a few staff members had used the walkie-talkie to ask whoever it was to stop fooling around, but with no success. I was suspicious of one student because I saw him on the playground with many students around him talking and laughing. I walked over, and they immediately dispersed and acted like nothing was going on. Later that day, on the walkie-talkie, I heard, "No, OP, I will not be going to the principal's office." I immediately recognized the voice. I called the student over and just said, "Give me the walkie-talkie." This kid, a 10-year-old, had gotten a walkie-talkie, found out what channel staff used, and messed around with the staff for almost a full day. I had to call his parents, but I did respect the genius behind the prank. Story 82. I worked in a middle school, and every day this teacher would confiscate pencil cap erasers and whiteboard markers from this one kid because he would play with them and make marker swords in class. She used to return them after school, but after a while she just started keeping them because they were so distracting. Somehow, this kid still manages to procure and then bring more pencil cap erasers and whiteboard markers almost daily, which the teacher continues to confiscate. She distributes the markers to the other teachers. The funniest thing to me was when I met her husband at a function. He said that he keeps finding the erasers everywhere. Laundry, from pockets, the dish where they keep their keys, car cup holders, etc. Then his wife proceeds to remove her wallet and her phone from her purse and turn it upside down. Out flowed hundreds of erasers tumbling off the table. Another teacher sees and says, "Oh, are those from student?" and proceeds to empty her pockets of more erasers. What is this kid mass producing them? The second you stop confiscating them, the stock is gonna drop. Story 83. I am a very weird individual, and my teacher back in 4th grade, when she was surprised checking backpacks to see if any of the students brought packaged food or a phone or anything unallowed, found a screwdriver, a small pair of pliers, a motherboard of a small old phone I took out, a set of replaceable screwdriver pieces, and a pocket knife. Paranoid in my class thought I was plotting something sinister as soon as they saw that motherboard. Probably because they didn't recognize it. It was a motherboard and not part of a technical nuke or something, and the pocket knife. She confiscated it and lost both the motherboard and my pocket knife. Got my pair of pliers, screwdriver, and the set of screwdriver bits back after school. Story 84. It wasn't me that apprehended him, but there was a kid in the school supposedly selling drugs. It was weird because he's a brilliant kid, smart, polite, never any trouble. So when this got found out, all of the teachers were shocked. My boss, his form tutor, went into the meeting with the head teacher and the school's police officer to ask him if he was selling drugs to kids around the school. Apparently, just brazenly said yes, then pulled out a handful of small Ziploc bags with a white powder. Sherbet. It was sherbet. He was selling small packets of sherbet around the school, which probably cost him about 30 pence to put together, or $5 each. He said he made over $200, including repeat custom, because they thought that weird feeling they got by snorting sherbet was a high. The school couldn't really do anything except confiscate the sherbet and tell him to not do it again. Story 85. Oh lordy, I had to confiscate a jet lighter with at least 30 milliliters of lighter fluid in there off a 6-year-old student. I live in Australia, and we had literally just had a terrifying summer of intense bushfires. The kid was spotted trying to light the grass on fire. Thankfully, he only managed to light a singular leaf. Cue my phone call to the family, and the dad answers and says, "Oh, he must have stolen it from me." Me, "It is quite serious, Mr. Blank. I'm afraid due to the fire ban and because of the nature of the lighter, you will have to pick your child up." Parent, "Oh, come on, it's just being a little crap like usual. Cut me some slack." Cue the parent hanging up on me. I have to say, that's the wildest thing I've ever confiscated. Thankfully, the school wasn't burnt down that day. I'm sorry, I don't know if that Australian accent was great on the fly, but we'll figure it out. Story 86. Not a teacher, former student, and I have 2 from high school. In my 11th grade history class, our teacher was a boozer who hid vodka in his water bottle. He was usually sloshed by our class at the end of the day and always had this weird hacking wet cough, so our class just terrorized him to no end. He told us we would be the death of him and wound up having a massive bypass surgery some years later. Anyway, one day he popped in a video and wandered off somewhere, probably to drink more, and our class clown had come prepared. He waited for the teacher to be out of sight, then quickly swapped the video for an adult content he snuck to school. Turned the volume up and our whole class was absolutely howling. Took a few minutes, but the teacher in the next room got curious about what the heck was going on, so she came over and quickly started absolutely fumbling to turn off this adult content and take the tape. Meanwhile, Teacher Drunky Face is nowhere to be found. I think it took them like 10 minutes to find him. That was a great day. Grayson, I hope you've had an amazing life so far, and I'll never forget that. Also, post-Columbine, they started being a-holes about dumb stuff, including trench coats. In MT, where it gets well below zero in the winter, they accused me of being in a mafia because of a $300 insulated suede coat. Backwater morons. And they started a new random locker search policy. My friends and I decided, okay then, we're going to put confusing, weird, semi-alarming items in our lockers to waste all their time. So one of my buddies puts items such as a blown-up photo of Charles Manson with a heart drawn on it, a satanic Bible, a stuffed Pikachu, a Kama Sutra book, a small Jesus poster, and some other just totally random crap. We kept hoping his locker would get searched, but never heard anything about it. A few other friends did get questioned about random dumb things put in lockers for fun because they thought maybe they were some low-down gang crap. Seriously, Montana public schools are absolute crap. Story 87. I remember back in grade 6 of primary school, about 10 years old, we got a goodie bag after a big presentation from a health or fitness organization. These goodie bags contained one of those. These were cool and virtually harmless until one kid found out that you could unfold them in people's face, thus making the frisbee slap the person like a go-go gadget extendo disc attack. And this quickly caused pandemonium because everyone was slapping each other. Some cried, some laughed, but everyone was armed and on the offense. The teacher confiscated them, but thought it was too mean to not give the general fitness gift back, so after class, we got them back and just everyone involved expected the war continued. On the playground right outside of school, of course, where the teachers couldn't stop us. It went on for about 10 minutes until everyone had to leave with their parents. No one was seriously injured in this skirmish. The worst scars some kids had were some red marks on their face, but due to the cornerless nature of circles, all eyes stayed intact. The cornerless nature of circles. I like that. Story 88. Not a teacher, but as a student in 5th grade, they banned all mechanical pencils. This was 2004. We figured out how to take those cheap .07 millimeter big mechanical pencils and remove the bottom to fashion them into staple shooters. We got pretty creative with them. There was one recess where there was about 20 of us playing in the open field. We created teams and had a full shootout. We got caught because one of them managed to fire hard enough to pierce a kid's skin. He got freaked out that there was a small staple sticking out of his skin, immediately started crying and ran to the teacher, which led to him telling them everything that was going on. We all got called into a group meeting with our teachers and principal about how we even fathomed this oddly creative and clearly dangerous idea. They called our parents and let them know. The funny part was that the kid was fine. They didn't bother getting us in trouble, they just confiscated everyone's mechanical pencils and provided us with regular wood pencils. Story 89. Too long didn't read a cup full of human poop and bugs that a little girl manipulated others to make for her. I was an outdoor camp counselor for a couple summers. One year we found this girl with a cup of mud that she was mixing with a stick. No big deal at an outdoors camp, until another kid told us that it was a cup of human poop. Long story short, she manipulated a young boy to go to the boys' room and get a poop from the toilet that another child didn't flush. She then convinced him to pee in it, and then proceeded to mix in sand, ants, and other things she found into this poop potion. When we found out and asked her why she did it, she said the other kids aren't smart and wanted to see if she could make them do it. I assume she's in a mental institution now, or a politician. Oh, that's so gross. Story 90. I teach high schoolers in a middle school, high school. The weirdest things I've had to take away both came in little plastic baggies. I have a couple comfy dorm room style chairs in class for students to sit and do their work in. I'm sitting at my desk and I look up, just checking to see what's going on in the class, and notice a bag with a few ounces of weed just sitting on the floor under one of these occupied chairs. I call security and wait a good 4 to 5 minutes until they arrive, just teaching, chilling, watching this bag of weed that not one student has noticed on the floor. Turns out because 2 students were sitting next to each other, they couldn't hold anyone responsible. The other baggies were from some of the 6th graders who were running around the halls with sugar crack, aka pixie sticks and baggies. Story 91. Not a teacher, but back in 3rd grade, I had the worst teacher of my effing life. If you yawned, you got sent to the principal's office. Anyway, while at lunch, one day she comes over to me and looks directly into my soul. She then took my lunchbox, which had a car on it because why the F not, and she says this to me, "You effing idiot," then takes away my lunch for the next week. And one time a kid was using a pen to fill in the dots on an answer sheet because pencils never wrote dark enough without almost breaking it, so she just goes over to him and takes the pen, but instead of putting it on her desk, she decides to be a female dog and breaks the pen in half, then throw it out the window, and when I told her that was littering, I was sent to the principal for verbal harassment. 3rd grade was the worst effing school year of my life. Hey, nothing like asserting your dominance over a bunch of 9-year-olds. That's crazy. Story 92. I seem to spend a lot of my time taking away weird stuff from kids in my classroom. A small list. A tennis ball with hair and googly eyes glued on. Had to take it away because the kid was becoming obsessed and refusing to do anything other than sit snipping the hair and waving the scissors around. A stick sharpened to a point. A science skeleton leg. Only the one leg. Rubber gloves filled with water. A reading record soaked in wee. A lump of snow a student brought in from outside which they proceeded to sit and lick for a lesson and refused to give it up. A list of ways to summon the devil. Various demons. Hey, I'm never bored at work. Are we just going to walk past the jump from tennis ball to ways to summon the devil? Wow. Story 93. Not especially that weird stuff, but I remember a teacher asking us if we had fossils to bring into school in order to illustrate a biology history lesson. We were like 10. Turns out one of my female classmates had one big trilobite imprint, and it was really proud of showing it to everyone. Problem is, she was kinda an entitled child and started belittling and comparing it to other smaller fossils our friends brought. She did a good job upsetting everyone, even the teacher, as he was not paying enough attention to her amazing fossil and tried to talk about all of them. He had to ask her to stay quiet after she tried to interrupt him several times. When the lesson was over, everyone was tired of her behavior, and she was so frustrated she left without taking her parents' fossil. It was the last day before some holidays, and no one complained when one kid took the fossil for himself. I still wonder how she explained how it went missing to her family. Story 94. Hand sanitizer, aka Hanitizer. A kid was goofing off, so I had to sit him away from the rest of the class to get it together. I was helping other students for a little bit and saw my student rubbing Hanitizer all over himself and singing "Oops, I Did It Again" by Britney Spears. I asked him why, and he just glared at me, and I put the sanitizer in my locked cabinet. This kid is old enough for Reddit now, and if he sees this, I want him to know he brightened my heart every day. Second place, a bottle cap from their mouth. In about 3.2 seconds, a nonverbal kindergartner flung himself onto my lap, hung upside down off it, and shoved a bottle cap in his mouth. I was just snubbing, and I couldn't keep him from falling on his head while taking out the bottle cap, so I had to get a para-aide for assistance. Story 95. Airsoft/BB sniper rifle. This was not in a classroom, but in a dormitory. Teachers were required to check the student dorm rooms every few months for things they weren't supposed to have, such as cigarettes, cigarettes, alcohol, etc. Thing was, we always announced a day or so ahead of time when we would be coming through the dorms so the students had plenty of time to hide or get rid of contraband stuff. Even with the warning, a lot of them were idiots and didn't bother to hide stuff. I went into one room and immediately noticed all these tiny little yellow BBs all over the floor. I knew what they were and asked the student to give me the gun. He said he didn't have a gun and didn't know what the BBs were. A little rummaging produced the sniper rifle, but in parts, a scope here, a stock there. I was also amused when the kids' parents called to complain that we had taken the gun away, saying it was for sports training. Story 96. I saw a girl in my class, 6th grade, with a nice-looking ring on her desk. She wasn't wearing it. I told her that it was such a nice ring that I'd hold on to it for a day and give it back to her at the end of the day. She was okay with that. I emailed her mom, cautioning her about letting her daughter wear expensive or really nice jewelry to school. It could get damaged, lost, stolen, etc. About 5 minutes after I sent the email, she replied that it wasn't the daughter's ring, but it was the mother's wedding ring. Her daughter had stolen it from her and the mother had turned the house upside down looking for it. She told me her husband would be at the school within 15 minutes to get the ring, and he was. Never saw the ring again. I imagine there was quite a conversation when the girl got home. Story 97. NSFW. This happened about 12 years ago. While my students were writing their essays, I would walk between the rows and glance at their progress. One young lady was writing a little too fervently for an expository essay, so I glanced down at her paper as I walked past. Sure enough, it was a note. I tapped on her desk and whispered to get back to her essay. After 5 minutes, I made my way back to her desk, and she was still hammering away at this note. Now, at this point in my teaching career, it was common knowledge that if you were writing a note in my class, I would warn you, then confiscate it, and then read the note to the students. Everyone would laugh, the student would learn their lesson, and we would all move on. Well, when I took the note from this girl's desk, hell broke loose. She lunged at the note and screamed for me to give it back. Before I even had time to try to de-escalate the situation, the note writer was coming at me. Thankfully, 2 other girls grabbed her as I called the office. The principal and SRO ran down and took the writer away. After I got the class calmed down and back on track, I decided to find out why in the heck this note was worth going crazy over. Long story short, it was Girl A telling her friend Girl B that she was going to stop eating Girl C's butt if Girl C kept letting her boyfriend nut in it. Story 98. We broke into an abandoned pub near where I live. They had plywood covering the smashed windows that people previously used to gain access. Staying at my friend's house, it's 3 a.m., we decided to get in all black clothes and gloves, get a saw, spray, paint, and break in. We were 15-ish. We get there, make a square cut in the wood and climb in. It's total darkness, and all the other windows were boarded up, preventing any streetlights. Exploring with one phone light, we find everything a pub would have. Empty kegs, cutlery, even tablecloths still on the tables. We broke in upstairs and decided to go down to the ground floor, which was super creepy. The air smelled bad and every movement we made had a noise associated. The stairs creaked so loudly. My friend starts throwing plates off the walls, throwing glasses around and just generally destroying things. I was going to start spray painting some stuff. Couldn't find the can, so I asked my friend. He said he never had it. We both freeze and look towards the door creaking with the stairs. Then the unforgettable sound of the spray paint can shaking. The nearest window was boarded up, but my friend just put his boot right through it. We grabbed the wood and ripped it off the wall. We went out basically together, head first, with both of us getting cuts on our arms and legs from broken glass shards. We ran to his house, which was a 4 to 5 minute sprint. My friend fell after a minute or so of running, and I genuinely thought I was about to see something turn a corner after us. Never went back. Never found out what happened. I remember going home the next day. My clothes were covered in burglar paint, a sticky gray paint put on window edges to deter people. I got some clothes from my friend and burned them. I'm guessing a homeless guy lived there and tried to spook us off, which 100% worked. Other than that, I have no explanation for the can of paint shaking by itself. I want to believe in the supernatural, but I've got no evidence. In my head, I've decided it was the homeless guy. I don't know if this was supposed to be in the script or not, but hey, if it makes the cut, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Story 99. I wasn't the teacher, but when I was a freshman in high school, this girl was being super weird about her notebook. like going out of her way to tell people not to look at it kind of thing. I didn't think anything of it, but the guys in class obviously drew some interest. She went to the bathroom and happened to leave the notebook right on her desk. The boys opened it to find a very bizarre anime drawing of me and another girl I sat next to, naked, holding hands with our names labeled at the bottom. It was actually really creepy at how detailed this drawing was, and I did not know the esteemed artist, and I hardly knew the girl I apparently had a lesbian affair with. Obviously, the boys in class were less than mature about the situation, causing the 40-ish-year-old male history teacher to take it. When he saw it, he immediately turned red, and his first reaction was to yell at the guys for drawing it. As you can imagine, it turned into a very awkward scenario for everyone involved. I was just pumped she drew boobs. I wish I had to this day. That was so nice of her. Story 100. Not a teacher, but a former Passion Parties rep. I got a call from the school that my daughter had brought very inappropriate lollipops to school and I needed to come pick her up from the office. She was young, maybe first grade. I couldn't imagine what the heck they were talking about, and she surely didn't bring it from home since I didn't keep candy around. I show up and the principal brings me in and closes the door, then hands me the inappropriate lollipop, and I lost it laughing. I had made favors for my parties that were colorful condoms taped to a popsicle stick with my contact information labeled on the stick. My daughter had obviously been snooping in my party bag. I was the only one who found it funny, and I was scolded to be more careful going forward. Story 101. Not a teacher, but freshman year of high school, a friend stole a fetal pig's head from biology and gave it to me in the hallway. I had no idea what to do with it, so I just put it in my backpack, dropped my backpack off in class, then went to the bathroom. When I got back, I guess one of my peers said something and the teacher was going through my backpack. She was horrified when she found it and made me go with her as we went from one biology class to another to return it. Not one of my finest moments, but I never got in trouble. She just berated me in front of our class when we got back, and I said some snarky comments. Story 102. Not a teacher, but I worked as a residential counselor for a gifted student summer program. They were late middle school and early high school kids taking 3 weeks of a college class. I did this all summer for 2 years. We had to confiscate bar soap from the dorms because the students started eating them. Apparently one counselor did it in front of his kids on a dare, and it spread through the camp like wildfire. Also banned smoothies, rap battles, and for a while one kid wasn't allowed to have Q-tips because we had to take him to the emergency room to get one pulled out of his ear canal at 3 a.m. On the way back, he asked if we could stop at a fast food joint. So many stories from this camp. Fun times. Sad it couldn't live through COVID though. Story 103. Obligatory, not a teacher, but when I was a kid in elementary school, we had a jump rope competition for something. I remember I wanted to get an edge on everyone else by bringing sugar in to get crazy or whatever. I was a kid and was expecting the sugar high to help me, and like 3 of my friends went into the bathroom beforehand and started eating raw sugar. I had brought it in like a Ziploc sandwich bag. Everyone else threw the bag I brought for them away, but I kept like 2 in my pockets. Flash forward to the jump rope competition. I'm jumping like crazy. 2 bags of sugar fall out of my pockets, spilling all over the mats we were on. My gym teacher came running over, and I was so scared expecting to get in trouble, so I'm sure I looked super shady and suspicious because kids can't lie. I can only imagine that my teacher thought I had some harder drugs on me or something as I'm covered in white powder and trying not to cry from getting in trouble. He's taking performance-enhancing sugar. This kid's a cheater and a genius. I don't know what to feel. Story 104. Not a teacher, but I feel like this is a tangentially related story. When I was in high school, I had the privilege of going to a private school for 1 year after being banned from all public schools in my state for a year. Disciplinary crap. The private school I went to was far worse than any public school in almost every imaginable way. Due to the tiny nature of the student body and the faculty basically having to copulate to spoiled rich kids whose parents would unenroll them and effectively shut down the school if the kids were unhappy, the kids literally did whatever they wanted 95% of the time. This was during the time that 2 Girls, 1 Cup was new to the internet and all the kids were talking about and showing it to anyone who was naive enough to ask about it. One of our teachers, a 60 to 70-year-old woman who had spent decades at the school, heard us watching it in class one day and absolutely demanded we show her what we were watching. Most of my friends, myself included, would generally only watch about 20 to 30 seconds of this video before looking away in disgust. This old crazy lady sat and watched the entire thing. Well, about a minute and a half of it until my friend who was showing it to her literally couldn't stand it anymore and took his laptop back from her. Pre-smartphone days. To this day, I'm not sure if she was that much of a creep or she was teaching us dumb effing teenage boys one of the most brutal lessons an old woman could about watching adult content in her class. However, it should be noted this took place in Louisiana, and that is certainly a factor. Story 105. Perhaps the only thing that makes this weird is the fact that it was an effing university course. My second year teaching, I asked students to bring in examples of visual rhetoric. We did not yet have a computer or projector in the classroom, so it was difficult to show things that way, so physical examples would have to do. Each student explained how their example worked rhetorically, and if it was small, would pass it around. In this school, your freshman writing class wasn't taken till your sophomore or junior year, so the people involved were 19 to 21. They didn't like this one guy, so they took his example and sat on it and refused to give it back to him or me and were laughing about it. I literally told them to get out of my class if they were going to act like children, because a university is absolutely no place for bullying somebody like they were still in the 4th grade. They actually gave me an excuse, that the guy was really annoying, that I didn't know what it was like because he was in all their classes. I threw them out, got the stuff back, and reported their behavior to my chair, and it later went all the way to the dean. There weren't any further problems in my class. JFC. Story 106. Usually, I hate leaving a not a blank comment, but I feel like this one will get some laughs. Context, this was in middle school. All the good kids sat in the front of the bus. My twin friends and I sat in the very front seats, I right behind the driver and the two right next to me, which doesn't matter as much. And all those kids sat in the back. We were driving home, hadn't even hit the first stop yet. Kids in the back had been shouting and laughing a bit differently than usual. We were just about there, maybe 2 minutes away, when suddenly the driver aggressively pulled over to the side of the road. She picked up the microphone and started firmly telling the kids, "In the back, I saw what you were throwing back there. Bring it up here." Now, naturally, us good kids were upset. We sat there for maybe 20 minutes, the kids in the back refusing to bring it up and insisting one or each of them didn't have it. Finally, for the love of God, one of them sucked it up and walked up the aisle. I looked over, and what do I see? A used condom. Yes, you heard it. Used. And this wasn't one of theirs. Oh no, this looked like one of their dads had just very recently used it. It was disgusting. So maybe not exactly confiscated since it got tossed in the bin, but still. Oh my gosh. This bus driver needs a raise. Story 107. This will probably get buried since this is on the front page now. My first year of teaching, I taught high school freshmen. One girl who had already showed signs of being troublesome was being very nice to me one particular day. She asked if I could open up a safety pin for her, as in open it wider so the needle point was erect from the rest of the pin. I was taken off guard by all this because she was barely awake most days, so I started to do what she asked without thinking too much about it. This was surprisingly hard to accomplish. So while I'm working on it, I ask, "What do you need this for?" She blatantly stated that she intended to pierce her ear with it, in class, as soon as I handed it back. Needless to say, I threw it away and she went back to her normal attitude. Story 108. Not a teacher, but a student. One time my friend, who was the nephew of my 9th grade teacher, they looked like brother and sister though, nearly identical, and pretty much acted the same way, saw that a girl who was a known lesbian, watching videos on her phone during lunch and saw she was watching a naked young woman. He called his aunt and she took it away. Turns out it was her undressing and she filmed it up in a tree, classic stalker style. After class was over, the nephew waited for the girl in the parking lot. Didn't see the beatdown, but she was messed up pretty bad. Also, unrelated detail, the teacher and her nephew were so close a lot of people joked about them being incestuous. Story 109. Okay, 6th grade, Catholic school, early 1980s. The knee socks, the green plaid skirts, and mass in the morning, the whole bit. It all began when I found this book at home in the linen closet behind the towels called Block Party. It looked like a novel, but it read like the most unimaginable, shocking adult content ever printed. I mean, not just intimates, but like group intimate scenes with animals and other stuff even middle-aged me doesn't want to mention. I don't know if it was my mom's book or my older sister's. After I read a few chapters, I took it to school and snuck it to my best friend so she could take it home and check it out. The next day, she brought it back to class and tossed it to me across 2 rows of desks. The teacher, a sloppy male lay teacher in his first and last Catholic school job, grabbed the book, took it up to his desk, cracked it open, and started to read. He could have landed on any page at random and would have certainly found unspeakable smut in every paragraph. Within seconds, I was called out to the hallway. When asked where I got the book, I just told the truth. We walked back into the classroom and he placed the book in his bottom right-hand drawer where he kept his textbooks. He never mentioned the book again. All that night, at home, I kept waiting for a call from the teacher to my mom, but it never happened. Just when I thought I was out of danger, I walked into class the next morning. Our teacher was missing, and the principal, Sister Mary Leonette, was sitting in his desk. To this day, 40 years later, I can still feel my heart beating in my ears as she opened his textbook drawer to begin class. If she had pulled out the paperback, held it up, and said, "What's this?" every single kid in that room would have pointed at me. But she didn't pull out Block Party. She pulled out the math textbook. I'm pretty sure my teacher stayed home that day to read the book, but I will never know for sure. Story 110. I was the perpetrator in this one. I was in second grade, and my twin brother and I were in separate classes. Our older brother had gotten a set of walkie-talkies for Christmas, and my twin and I thought it would be grand to bring them to school so we could talk to each other in class. We were instantly caught, and our teachers had a laugh over it. The best part was that they were novelty walkie-talkies, shaped like Coca-Cola bottles. We were so sure that we would make them undetectable. Many years later, as an assistant scout leader, I had a kid with a little plastic baggie of white powder that they were eating and passing around. I found out about it after one of them threw up, so I confiscated it. Turned out it was citric acid. The kid actually came to my house, lived down the street from each other, to ask for it back, but I just passed it off to the troop leader. Story 111. My science teacher had split us into pairs and draw ecosystems labeling all the parts of the food chain. Me and my buddy Peter would sit in the back and doodle all class. The teacher had no issue because we were the two best students on the class and never failed to turn in work or ace the quizzes. We got really creative with this project. Instead of a rainforest or a desert, we decided on hell. We drew fire monsters, hellhounds, and wayward souls, and crap. We were almost done when he came to the back of the room to check on our progress, and when he saw the scorched landscape, he took our poster and made us redo it. Not a strange object, just strange that the teacher confiscated an assignment from the students. Story 112. I taught 5th grade. Did not expect to confiscate the following: fireworks, found when someone accidentally set one off in the classroom to make sure it was working; BB gun pistols, which the kid was selling to other students; and a 7-inch chef's knife. How else was she going to cut the melon she brought for snack? But honestly, what was the funniest was I had to confiscate a fake paper economy. A kid made up a fake currency, sold it to classmates for real money, and they could use it to purchase paper objects made by the student. Paper cell phones, paper computers, etc. It got a little out of hand, and he had needed to step up production and was outsourcing manufacturing to his neighbors during class time. It was very distracting, and eventually I had to ban the whole kit kat and caboodle. Story 113. I have a student that brings common household items and school items that I constantly have to take away. Paper clips, plastic utensils, plastic wrap. The most annoying and gross thing she does is at the end of the lunchtime, if they didn't finish, they pull out plastic wrap, crush everything together, literally all the food she didn't eat, pour any leftover sauce on top, and then roll it up in the plastic wrap, and it will make a really, really gross burrito sushi roll thing and eat it throughout the day. We have sent emails home to her mom saying please don't send her to school with these items, and mom responds back saying they don't even have plastic utensils or plastic wrap at home. So we don't even know where she is getting these items between the curb of the school and the classroom. Story 114. Not a teacher, but when I was in primary school, there were some kids who definitely had interests that were a little on the dangerous side. One kid brought some live .22 rounds to school, proceeded to show everyone what a cool bang they made by hitting one with a piece of concrete. Yep, they made a heck of a bang and left a bit of a crater in the concrete. I have no idea where the bullet ended up. Pretty sure the teacher had kittens when they realized what was going on. Another kid, or possibly the same one, I can't remember, started making bolt bombs. There was a tall freestanding concrete wall for kids to kick or throw balls against. He threw the bolt bombs over that wall where they exploded in relative safety. Relative, because at least one of the bolts was fired back over the wall again. Again, that fun didn't last long before a teacher shut it down. I wonder if the teachers thought they had a bunch of terrorists in training on their hands. Story 115. Not a teacher, but in 6th grade, there was a girl that was notorious for sneaking things into her backpack. along with being a pathological liar. We'd find things in her backpack like littlest pet shops, other people's belongings, the typical crap for a 6th grader. Heck, she even stole my expensive headphones for months only to return them and claiming she found them in the lost and found, even though it had been announced at least twice that year that the lost and found items not claimed were to be cleared and donated. But this time we found something different. One day, the girl kept going back to her backpack, sitting back there and then returning, and the teacher was becoming distracted by it. So she asked another student to go search her backpack. The student got up, went digging in there, and pulled out a flimsy, greasy napkin filled with mashed potatoes, ketchup, and chicken nuggets from that day's lunch in there, along with a headless Barbie doll partially wrapped up in it. Oh, 6th graders, you're nothing but a bunch of potential serial killers. Oh, sorry, I kind of popped that S there. Story 116. I was a substitute teacher 5 years ago when they tried to take away a marijuana inhaler, which looked like a regular asthma inhaler, and the student was using it all class. I had suspicions, but had nothing to act on them with, until he sprayed his classmates in the face with it, at which point I'm able to demand the inhaler. Student refuses. I insist I need to see it to know what he's taking, at which point he cites his right to medical privacy. I explained to him that once he chemically assaulted his classmate, his right to medical privacy is gone, and the need to know what was sprayed in case the victim needs medical treatment takes precedent. He refused to hand it over. So I called the office, explained the situation, and a security officer came and took the kid and his inhaler to the office. They're able to determine it's a marijuana inhaler, and the kid is suspended and probably facing expulsion. Since I was just there for a day, never really found out what happened after. Story 117. Oh boy, I found a giant wad of Baby Bell cheese wax, a mangled bookmark of a Yorkie that the class lawyer demanded was the mascot for our division, carved out glue stick covered in dark red-brown goop, looked like coagulated blood or poop. It was super gross. 200 plus copies of a printout of a grainy image of gorillas having relations that was distributed amongst 2 classes and hidden in desks. Random nails taken from the outside of the building and curved. This is all from the first 6 months of teaching intermediate elementary. Makes me miss teaching high school sometimes. I love the quick list, the spectrum from Baby Bell cheese to intimate gorillas to nails. It's a ridiculous whole gambit. Story 118. Not a teacher, but around freshman year in high school, some new kids came into our school and went around telling the students that already went to the school about how they can get the Smarties candies, crush them, snort them, and get hyper, is what they called it. Like it was a low-key keyword that teachers wouldn't notice. Every student involved or even interested got 3 days school suspension for suspension of snorting drugs. There were only like 15 students involved. Another unrelated story, a year later, like 7 students, including me, had to use the bathroom all within an hour time span. And when I went into the restroom, I got a weird vibe. And then when I was returning to class, I sat down. And 5 minutes later, I get called to the office, and then the principal gathered all 7 of us, walked us to the conference room. We all walked in there, and there were 2 cops with cuffs in their hands. And I was like, what's going on? And then the principal, who was actually my cousin, took each of us individually into a separate small room, and the cops questioned us about who had smoked marijuana in the girls' bathroom. They questioned all of us until it got to the last girl, and she came out in cuffs, and we were all looking like, what? Because she was the least expected student to be smoking anything, while I was more than likely to smoke something because I've snuck in raspberry vodka in water bottles and drank it throughout the day like nothing, but I never got caught. Wow! Well, guys, looks like that'll conclude our ridiculous weird things found at the school story. If you guys have any weird or crazy objects that you've either found or brought in yourself, feel free to comment down below. Because I'm fascinated, and kids are weird, and it's always funny. So, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see ya. Peace.